We're very lucky to be joined tonight by Joseph Postma. Joseph, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Nice to meet you, David. Nice to be on with you.
Good, good. And you're from Calgary in Canada.
That's right. Yeah, we just had a minus 40 degrees Celsius cold snap that lasted about a week.
Minus 40, that's chilly.
You get temperatures like that there? Where you're at?
No.
No.
Where we are, because of the Gulf Stream in the UK, you tend not to
Yeah, you get that warm air from the ocean.
Yeah. So in the Highlands of Scotland, it got down to about minus 24 a couple of weeks ago, which was a record low. But no, we don't get cold like that. What's that like? I've been in minus 24 in Poland, and it was unbearable. So what's minus 40 like?
Yeah, it's pretty unbearable. I mean, it's hard to breathe, actually. You go out and breathe, and it makes you cough instantly because the ice vapor crystallizes inside your lungs right away. So it's difficult to be out in. It's certainly not nice on the skin either. Although as Canadians, we will go put out the trash in our t-shirt even in that, so it's fine.
You're tough. You're tough guys. Where's the name Postma from then? Is that from anywhere particular in the world?
Yeah, that's a Dutch name. It's a Friesen Dutch name. Northern Dutch.
Northern Dutch. So that's where your family was from originally. Well, it was one of our viewers got in touch that said it would be interesting to talk to you about climate science, which is a topic that we're very interested in. I love Greta Thunberg, Joseph. She's just my favourite girl in the world.
I'm sure she is, yes. I don't detect any sarcasm there.
None. Joseph, listen, Greta is an angelic, sweet, cherub-like child that just wants to make the world a better place. Is that true, or is it not true?
Well, that's all it takes, right? I mean, that's all it takes in the world is to be a sweet little child that wants to make the world a better place. And then, and since that's all it takes, then you just believe everything they say, right? Because how could they possibly be wrong? How could they possibly say anything that's incorrect or have any incorrect beliefs about anything? I mean, it's not that her parents are in control of her and trying to make money off of her and get in the limelight off her or anything like that. No.
So what?
As we all know, 14, 15-year-old teenage girls are the paragons of reason and virtue and everything we should want to be in this world, really, right?
That's very true. I mean, I actually have a theory that her parents put her on puberty blockers because she's 18 now, isn't she? But she looked about 12.
Oh, is she?
Most of her life. I mean, there's something. I mean, regardless of all the stuff that she spouts, there's just something off about it. This young, tiny, pixie-like Swedish girl who gets to go and have meetings with Barack Obama, all the top. There's something stinks about it.
It's all quite ridiculous. Something stinks about this whole situation, doesn't it? That we're going to get into, aren't we?
We certainly
There's something stinky all around this place, all around this planet.
So now, I got it into my head for some reason that you're not into flat Earth theory, are you?
No, of course not. No.
Okay.
Are you?
I for some stupid reason, I don't know why I thought that. I thought you were. Excuse my ignorance. I think because we've just been so busy there. So just to confirm, because a lot of our viewers say the world is flat. Is the world flat or is the world round?
Well, I'm going to present something that your viewers are going to love and they're going to find great humor in. Firstly, I'll just say that. So stay tuned because they're going to love what I've got to show them about flat Earth theory. Not that I believe in it because I don't. So yeah, I believe that the Earth is round. I accept round Earth theory. I'm a
Okay, good.
Yes, I'm a spherical Earth.
Good. Is it everything that we are told? Is it everything we are told?
What? What do you mean?
Like would It's just we have, and I don't know this is a bit wacky, but we have people that say like, "Oh, the world's a sphere," or is all that real? Is all that? It's not real. We are what NASA says about us.
Yes, we're on a spherical planet. Yes, I would. Yeah, that's true. Although, what we're going to get into is going to expose that, we do have an expert class problem where now, the news and you read articles and all that articles have to do is say university research finds or says, and then, we're all told to just trust doctors implicitly and academics implicitly, but really that is not the situation. That is not the state of things. We really can't trust the expert class anymore, and a lot of the stuff that they say is wrong. But of course, it's never an easy cut and dried black and white problem. It's a mixture of truth and lies. Typically, the lies are when they're asking you to do something for them. That's an easy way to identify the lies. When they're asking you to do something for them, they're probably lying about something. The truth is found generally in stuff that doesn't make a difference. Although it should, and we're going to see that.
Just before we move on to that, then, what's your take on the whole COVID situation then?
Well, I think that it seems to be that it's similar to climate alarm. So this is how some sort of group seems to operate in the world. And I'm not sure what this group is or who they are, if it's coordinated or if it's just accidental out of convenience. But in the climate alarm example, climate change, for example, we have a group of people who have simply identified something which has always existed. And then they point it out to us as if it's something new and demand now that they should control all of our lives for it. So now with COVID, they've pointed out to us that there is such a thing as the cold and flu, and that people die from it every year. People die from it by the hundreds of thousands every year, the cold and flu. And so what they've done is they've pointed that out to us and named it COVID and said now they need to control our lives because people die from the cold and flu, which has already always happened anyway. And these people, they go on the news and they say, like just in Alberta here, we had the health minister on talking about COVID deaths. And then she says, but we're happy to report that there are 0 cold and flu deaths this year. There are 0 cases of cold and flu. And we're like, this is Canada. We suffer from the cold and flu all winter long. Several times a winter, an individual will get the cold or the flu 2 or 3 times throughout the course of our long winter, right? And so now there's 0 cold and flu. Well, it's because you're calling it COVID, and now you want to control our life. So anyway, that's the sort of scheme. That's a sort of scheme that seems to be successful. You simply point out something that has always existed, tell everybody that it's new, and that you need to control everybody for it. And typically this scheme seems to work.
So do you believe that SARS-CoV-2 exists?
Yeah, it probably does exist. It seems to be some sort of mixture of cold and flu, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that it came out of this lab and that it's some sort of novel splicing together of cold and flu strains. Isn't that basically what it seems to be?
Because what these experts argue is that COVID's like nothing we've ever seen before. It's totally virulent. It does all these things, but then as you quite rightly point out, flu cases have dropped. And what they say is with these PCR tests is that the PCR tests pick up historical flus and historical colds. And if you stop the testing, there would be no pandemic. As simple as that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we have 0 cases of cold and flu, and so 0 people dying from cold, flu, or pneumonia, which typically people are dying by the tens of thousands of every year. So that's not happening anymore at all. And then basically not that many people here anymore or ever were really being harmed by COVID. And sure, we don't like that, but I mean, people were always being harmed by the flu and pneumonia and whatnot every year as well. So.
Yeah, but it's part of the sort of the wider thing. So then moving on then to climate change. Is climate change going on, and is it man-made?
Climate change has always existed, and current climate change is indistinguishable from nominal historical variations. Understand what I mean by that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So modern climate change, the climate change we're studying now, over the last 5 years, over the last 1 year, over the last 10 years, the variations that are happening over the last time scale, in any way you want to define it, the last 100 years, all of the changes that we have are indistinguishable from nominal historical variations as you see in the paleoclimatological record. It's
Okay.
basically like looking at noise. We're looking at noise and we just see identical snapshots of noise. You know, you have to go back to 10,000 years ago to find something that's really identifiable. Of course, there's a medieval warm period and things like that. But the last 100 years has been quite nominal. Nothing very interesting has happened in the last 100 years or in the last 10 years at all.
But what these climate change experts would argue is that it's a result of CO2 emissions being trapped within the atmosphere, causing the Earth to heat up. In your opinion, is that accurate?
No, that's not accurate. It's entirely wrong. It's entirely false physics. It's totally pseudoscientific, actually. Um, Carbon dioxide is increasing, and it's not even clear that it's actually from human activity, because even with this lockdown now going on for a year, massive reduction in economic activity, massive, global as well. And there's no change in the curve of the rising CO2 concentration. So it seems that the rising CO2 concentration in the atmosphere is actually natural in any case. It's coming out of the earth, probably coming out of the oceans.
But here, okay. Now, I'm surely though, mankind, you see these factories in China, you see these factories in India, you see these pictures of what used to go on. Surely some of the stuff that we are spewing out into the atmosphere is going to have a negative impact on the world, is it not?
No, that's it. That's a very good point. Yeah, so that requires us, a question like that requires us to actually identify and define what pollution is. So carbon dioxide, let's consider that, for example. This is not actually pollution. Carbon dioxide is not pollution. No, neither does it cause heating in the atmosphere. To cause heating, you need to be a heat source, means you need to be releasing energy. CO2 doesn't do that. It's just a passive inert gas, just like nitrogen and oxygen are, just floating around in the atmosphere. It doesn't produce heat, so it cannot warm the planet that way. We can get more into that later. So firstly, carbon dioxide is not pollution. It's plant food. We pump it into greenhouses to 5 times the outdoor atmospheric concentration. We pump it to 5 times the concentration in greenhouses. Why? Because plants love carbon dioxide, because they evolved in time periods where carbon dioxide was outside in the air 5 times and much higher than that even. So we pump it into greenhouses because it's a gaseous fertilizer. You can essentially think of it as a gaseous fertilizer. Carbon dioxide is gaseous fertilizer. It's actually the basis of life. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is how carbon gets into the biosphere as an organic element to be turned into DNA and life. So carbon dioxide is not pollution. It's an environmentally friendly gas. It's an environmentally friendly, beneficial gas, just like sprinkling phosphorus and nitrogen and calcium and whatnot on your garden. You are instead in the air, you're filling the air with carbon dioxide because it's a fertilizer that plants love, right? So the other things you're talking about, yes, mercury can come out of dirty coal-fired power plants, the old-fashioned kind of course, coal plants now are extremely clean. They're wonderful, actually. They just release carbon dioxide and water vapor, which are great for the environment, and they scrub out all of the really nasty stuff. So yeah, what you're referring to is actual pollution. So actual pollution would be mercury and arsenic and whatever else can come out of nasty, poor combustion, low efficiency, old-fashioned sort of power plants, which the third world typically is using. Yeah.
I should have actually said at the start, I'm just looking up your biography, Joseph, and you have a master's degree in astrophysics, and you've been working
that's right, yeah.
For the Canadian Space Agency through the University of Calgary. You became interested in the global science debate You used to believe in anthropogenic global warming and climate change. You discovered the science which underlies global warming and anthropogenic climate change isn't good science at all, but it's better described merely as the appearance of doing science.
That's right. Yeah, it's pretend science. It's pseudoscience. It's the pretense of science. Yeah, absolutely.
But what? So
it's quite. Yeah.
But we're constantly being told by like fact checkers, organisations, the science on this is settled. The science is settled. Is it?
Well, this gets into the whole debate or into the whole strategy that this other side seems to employ. Yeah, there's so they like to use the tactics of peer pressure, and then if you don't bow to peer pressure by them saying how can you disagree with everybody, then they'll use ad hominem, which means they'll just start insulting you, and they'll just start attacking you and things like this. And so it's a very strange phenomenon. I mean, it's not typically acceptable in today's world to say there is a coordinated conspiracy of people behind this using these tactics in rhetoric, like what I call sophistry. That's why my YouTube site is Climate of Sophistry, and same with my blog, Climate of Sophistry, because it's tactics in sophistry. And sophistry just means how to argue to win. That means we're not going to use truth. We just want to argue as best as we can to make it look like we're winning, and indeed de facto then win. Because if you can berate your opponent well enough and create the appearance that you've won an argument, then you in fact have won an argument. Mm-hmm. Even if the argument contains no truth content whatsoever. So when they appeal to consensus and all these other things, it doesn't matter. Truth is not dependent on consensus. The consensus is not what determines the truth. And what I'm about to show you here is just so blatant. Like, it's just so blatant and obvious. And if you see the YouTube videos on my channel, for example, as well, what I show is just so blatant and obvious. It's clear that what they're saying is consensus truth or consensus science has made a really grand and great and fatal and a profound mistake, a profound error. They made this error. This error was almost allowed to be made because it's just so profound. Like, it's just so, once you see it, it's incredible to see. And you can almost understand why it was not seen in the first place. Because it's just so, like, it's the big lie, right? It's like, tell a lie big enough, no one will believe that the lie could possibly be that big and that profound.
Yeah, I mean, this is the hard thing for it. We have a sort of saying at UNN: you take what the mainstream media tells you and realise the entire opposite is the truth, and usually that kind of serves you well. So, before we kind of look into the science behind it, that leads on to why is this being pushed? Why are we being told that it's man-made climate change? Why are we being told that we have to give up cars? Why are we being told we shouldn't go on holiday anymore? Why?
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, why? Why do people want to exert this kind of power? And they're willing to exert this power under the falsest of pretexts, as we will see, under the most ridiculous pretexts. So why is there a group of people that want to do that? And who are the people? Well, they seem to be billionaires and they seem to be politicians. That's largely who these people are. So what is it that drives these people? Well, is it just simple? There's that expression, you have to be a bit of a psychopath to go into politics in the first place, And then what about a billionaire? You have to be a little bit probably psychopathic, perhaps, to be a billionaire. So is it really just we just have a problem of psychology? We simply have a psychological problem in psychopaths that will use any pretext whatsoever to control others, because this is simply what they get off on. You have to have a bit of a theory of mind about this, I suppose, and you simply have to appreciate that what drives me, for example, is truth and philosophy and logic and truth things. But That's a pretty dry and sanitized thing to enjoy in life. Most people don't enjoy things like that. If you imagine yourself in the to have the power of a politician or a billionaire, I mean, they must really get off and enjoy the power to control others. And that's a much more tangible power than simply enjoying truth and science and philosophy and mathematics.
As we've said as well, around the COVID debate, is that nobody who has an alternative voice to lockdowns, nobody who has an alternative voice to the severity of this is allowed to speak. And so many of those who have voiced concerns have been deplatformed off social media, or if they are a professional, like there was the Great Barrington Declaration, they've been attacked, they've been maligned, they've been told they're not getting any more work. But okay, so let's lead on then, Joseph. Have you got any slides or anything you want to show me? Because that would be brilliant. Just the stage is yours. Just explain it all to us. What's really going on?
Okay, so I want people to be drawn to this. So this is actually the foundation of climate science, and what I've done here is I have 6 different examples, and there's many more, but these are 6 good ones. So these diagrams basically show the basic model by which climate science uses to then explore and understand the physics of our climate. In this University of Chicago slide, you can see that there's a professor standing in front of a chalkboard, and he's just drawn what's shown in these other plots. In the bottom right, that is a publication from the American Meteorological Association called the Keelan-Trenberth Energy Budget, after those 2 fellows. And this is one of the most widely cited energy budget diagrams in climate science. And this diagram on the bottom right follows the same examples as all the rest here. So I want people just to have a look at this and notice what is the shape of the Earth in these diagrams. What is the math and physics that they are developing for with regards to the shape of the Earth?
It's flat.
So how would you answer that?
It's flat.
Right, it's flat. Now, does it make a difference to have a flat Earth versus a spherical Earth? I mean, does that have? I mean, there is that debate. I mean, are flat Earthers out there now, and they make a big deal out of the debate, and then scientists typically will, try to refute them, as if it's important, right? So, is it important or is it not important? Does it have consequence in physics and mathematics, or doesn't it? I mean, if it doesn't matter if you believe in or use flat Earth theory versus spherical Earth theory, then why bother with a debate? So is it important to have a flat Earth versus a spherical Earth in science, or is it not? Is it important to be aware of that difference in your mathematics and in your physics, or not?
So the universities are showing in these graphics a flat Earth. So is that not just for the purposes of showing it? Is that not just and it's an illustrative example?
Right. Well, would you illustrate the Earth as being flat? So what these diagrams show is sunlight. These arrows coming in are indicative of sunlight coming into the Earth. So does sunlight come into the Earth as a flat plane? Is that what sunlight experiences when it strikes the Earth? And does that difference between a flat Earth versus a spherical Earth versus how sunlight would fall on a spherical Earth, do you think it makes a difference in physics and math?
I would imagine it makes a significant difference.
You're absolutely right. It does make a difference in physics and math, or else why would we even worry about whether or not the Earth is spherical or flat? If flat Earth is just as good, well then why not just keep on using a flat Earth model? And why would we have progressed from a flat Earth model to a spherical Earth in history? Why would it have ever been important if it didn't make a difference? It does make a difference. So if you would like to go to the next slide.
Do flat earthers use this then as an example of that, giving evidence to the world being flat?
No, they don't. But this is the thing. I would love it if they would start to use this. Please use this. Please use these diagrams as your evidence. See, and you can say, look, This is peer-reviewed from the American Meteorological Society. This is the foundation of climate science. This is even on NASA websites and whatnot, diagrams like this, and they're all showing sunlight falling on a flat plane. The flat earthers can absolutely use this, and I would absolutely encourage them to.
Okay, good, because it kind of calls them into question. Right, so I've got this one here up. It says, which one? Sun, sphere Earth, sun, flat Earth. Okay.
Yeah. So here's the difference. So this is based off of a paper that I had submitted to the American Meteorological Society, explaining to them that there's an important difference in the physics and the mathematics versus how you treat sunlight falling on a flat Earth versus a spherical Earth. And so I tabulated some of those differences. So, for example, on the flat Earth model, which is the basis of climate science, there's mathematical consequences to how you shape the geometry, right? Because obviously the equations are different, and the way that you treat your variables is different because it depends on the geometry involved. The geometry, as we all know, has different equations for different shapes, right? So as a mathematical consequence of having sunlight falling on a flat Earth, it works out that you must divide solar power, the strength of sunshine, the heating power of sunshine, by 4. This is what you need to do. That's just how it works out mathematically. And this is shown directly in their diagrams. You can see in this bottom right, it has that incoming solar radiation, and then you can see that there's a divisor, divide by 4 there. So they're dividing the solar power by 4 in order to make it work with a flat Earth theory, with flat Earth. That's what you have to do. But the thing is, when you divide solar power by 4, you weaken it. I mean, on paper. This is what you're doing on paper in your model. So you're essentially dividing the power of something, the strength of something, by 4. This is similar to your car's engine. If your car can generate 400 horsepower, you're saying on paper, in theory, it can only actually produce 100 horsepower, yet you accelerate at a rate that's only possible with 400 horsepower. So which you can't explain with your theory that has only 100 horsepower. You see what I'm saying there, right? So what they've done is diluted the power of sunshine so that the sun cannot create the climate. Because when you do this factor 4, that reduces solar heating power to, coincidentally, as we talked about earlier, this temperature minus 40 degrees Celsius. So in their model, in the foundation of their understanding of the climate, they have, in their paper model, in their diagrams, reduced the effectiveness of the sun to a heating power, a heating strength of only minus 40 degrees Celsius. In other words, this writes the sun completely out of creating the climate, because most of our climate exists at a temperature above minus 40 degrees Celsius on the Earth, right? So if the sun can only produce the physics of minus 40 degrees Celsius, then the sun really doesn't create the climate. And that is the basis of their understanding of the climate. So the basis of their understanding of the climate is that the sun doesn't create it. And so they create, to make up for that deficit that they've created in their model, this deficit of solar power, what they've done is they've created this thing which they call the greenhouse effect, which isn't actually how a real greenhouse functions. It's a completely alternative idea, but they just named it the same thing, coincidentally. Which is, but it's a misnomer, and so they recycle heat a couple times over in order to have the climate create itself. So they recycle heat a couple times over for the climate to create itself, since in their position, the sun doesn't create the climate. And then so the active ingredient and the thing in their theory that creates the climate is greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide. So in their theory, it's going to be bad to have more carbon dioxide because that means more climate is going to be created. And they think that having more climate is going to be a bad thing, and therefore we should vilify carbon dioxide. So it's all just, it starts off with a crazy foundation of flat Earth theory and then extrapolates bad mathematics and all sorts of crazy conclusions, which make no sense whatsoever. So I had written and submitted this paper explaining that you can actually create a spherical Earth model of sunshine coming into the Earth. And when you do that, you don't need to divide. The geometry of this situation is such that it doesn't necessitate the division of solar power by 4. You keep solar power at its actual strength coming in, because as you know, you go out in the summertime and you feel nice warm sunshine. That's why we go to the beach, right? So we should actually use sunshine as it actually comes in, its real actual power. And if you do that on a spherical Earth, then it does not necessitate reducing the power of sunshine in your model. You use in your model what the real power of sunshine actually is. And in that case, when you use the real power of sunshine, the heating potential of sunlight when it comes and strikes the Earth is 121 degrees Celsius. And when it comes down to the surface through the atmosphere, it's still upwards of 90 or 100 degrees Celsius. So think of that difference. So when you use a spherical Earth model with sunlight coming in, that sunlight coming into that model on paper in your model has a heating power of 100 degrees Celsius. In the climate science model, their sun has a heating power of minus 40 degrees Celsius. So this goes back to the question, does it make a difference to have flat Earth theory or spherical Earth theory or not? And it was your position, right? You had said, and that was a brilliant comment, you said, well, I think indeed there should be a mathematical difference and a difference in physics. And so that's what it is. In the flat Earth model of the sunshine coming into the Earth, solar heating power is minus 40 degrees Celsius. If you use a spherical Earth model, then you get to use the real power of sunlight coming in, and that is 100 degrees Celsius. So don't you think that there's quite a bit of difference between the sun heating the Earth at 100 degrees Celsius versus minus 40 degrees Celsius, and how you're going to understand the climate afterwards? If your understanding of the climate is going to be based on thinking that the sun does not create the climate because the sun is only minus 40 degrees Celsius, then what kind of crazy theories are you going to come up with for how the climate works? And their crazy theory for how the climate works is that it creates itself with greenhouse gases. And that makes carbon dioxide this great evil, in their opinion, when it's actually a plant food, a fertilizer. Whereas when you use the real sunlight coming into a spherical Earth, well, now the climate is created directly, obviously, by 100 degrees Celsius sunshine coming in. Well, that's going to drive your evaporation. That's going to melt ice into water upwards, near the poles, and certainly once you get away from the poles at lower latitude. Now you have the sun creating the climate. So you have the sun creating the climate directly, melting ice, evaporating water, creating clouds, doing all sorts of things that only high temperature forcing of sunlight can do. You can explain that with the sun. In their model, you can't explain that with the sun, and so you have to create all sorts of other crazy physics that are just really extrapolations of flat Earth theory. What it really is, what they have done, is they have really simply extrapolated the mathematical consequences of how flat Earth theory would have to work. What they've done is all the work for the flat Earth theorists. They've created a whole theory for the flat Earth theorists. What they've done is they have said, if we assume that the Earth is flat and that sunshine comes into a flat Earth, well, this is how all the physics for that would work. And then it ends in their vilification of carbon dioxide. So they've done the work for the flat Earth theorists in creating a fully worked out mathematical flat Earth theory with how they think the physics would work in that case.
We've got a few people in the chat, Joseph, saying that they aren't basing this on a flat Earth model. Guys in the chat, frank and honest, put your comments there. So they're saying that this isn't based on a flat Earth model by the climate change scientists.
Well, how can they say that? We've shown, if you go back to that previous slide, this is the foundation of climate science. These 6 diagrams that are shown here, and plus there's a whole slew, you can find them everywhere. They're taught in classrooms. Here's a snapshot of a video lecture from a classroom at the University of Chicago, from a meteorology class.
Okay.
And so, yes, this quite very much is, and it is in their peer-reviewed literature. So here is your evidence right here. Anyone can look this up and find this. This is very much the basis of the understanding of climate in climate science. And it is flat Earth theory, because that is what you call a flat line, is a flat Earth.
if this is so obvious, then Joseph, that they're basing it on this, how many people are speaking out about it?
Well, I've been trying to draw people's attention to this, and I have a fairly good following on my YouTube and on my blog, and I have some really intelligent people who understand this and can appreciate it. The problem is that it's the problem about it's a psychological problem about the scale of lie that a mind is willing to comprehend. It's just so unbelievable. If you present this to your typical scientist who is, who has a totally religious sort of perspective or attitude towards science, that science can never make a mistake, you present this to them, and I talk to them and I say, what do you think? This, like I said, I wrote a paper on this, a detailed paper on this, showing how the math works out, and then saying, don't you think that this is an important difference? Saying that the climate is created by the sun versus the sun does not create the climate. I mean, that's a mutually exclusive difference. You can't have both. You have to choose. And they said, we're not going to publish this because it conflicts with the existing orthodoxy.
So two seconds, Joseph, let me come in.
Yeah.
People are wondering what's going on. Let me just try and explain this to the best of them that I can. So what Joseph's basically saying, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that all the evidence for climate change based on man-made, as a result of mankind, is based on assuming that the Earth is flat. The Earth is round, therefore all of their models are completely inaccurate.
Yeah, that's right. That's an excellent summary. Basically, because their whole perspective of researching the climate and theorizing about the climate is based on a completely wacky understanding. Like I was describing before, if you begin your understanding of the climate that the sun doesn't create it, well, then you're going to come up with all sorts of wacky and wrong theories for how the climate is actually created. And so everything that they're saying now about climate change is simply, and especially man-made climate change, it's based on this. It's based on these diagrams and on this greenhouse effect. You hear them refer to that greenhouse effect constantly, right? The greenhouse effect, as if it's such a bad thing. It doesn't even exist. The greenhouse effect only exists in their flat Earth math. The greenhouse effect only exists in their flat Earth math in order to make up for what they've done to the sun, not being able to create the climate. They create the climate instead with this fake greenhouse effect, which isn't how a real greenhouse actually works, but they just call it that.
And just to confirm again, the world is actually round. But then, what if they're actually admitting that the world is flat? What if this is them admitting that the world is flat?
Yeah, that would be funny, wouldn't it? That'd be a good one. Run with that. I mean, if people want to run with that, I say go run with that. Absolutely. I'm not going to. That's not my position. I prefer spherical Earth theory. But if other people want to run with that and do that, by all means, absolutely.
So that's why we have to panic.
I would fully understand your rationale for running with that.
So that's why we have to panic, because actually the world. So basically, you're wrong because you think the world is round. They're right because they're saying the world is flat. So we are actually doomed.
Yeah. If the world was flat, then everything they're saying is true. Yeah. If the Earth is flat, then all of their prognostications about climate change and the world are going to end in 12 years and 5 years, and already having ended in 2010 and 2005. All of that is true. Then, yeah.
Oh no! Well, so okay. I mean, obviously, I'm being somewhat. What's the word? Bring your screen back, Joseph. Bring yourself back on again, and then I'll get your face up there. Brilliant. I mean, we're just having a bit of laugh. So basically, just to confirm, the world is round. The world is round.
Yeah.
And these climate scientists are basing their models, according to your research, on a model that insists that the world is flat. But again, why are you the only one seeing this then? If this is that obvious, Why are you the only one seeing this?
It's some, yeah, well, I don't know. Am I the only one? I guess. I mean, not really. Like I said, I do have people that are following me, but like I said, it's very hard to discuss this with scientists, it seems, and it's quite uncanny. Actually, uh, like honestly, that's a great question, and you see me struggling to answer it, and I have to. You just have to appreciate that I am in a very strange state. Like I often am looking out at the world and other people and scientists, and I'm like, I am in some sort of crazy, bizarre world. Like I'm in like the Truman Show or something. Because this is crazy. Because how can I not? How can I not have scientists appreciate this? And as I said, I wrote that paper for the American Meteorological Society, and they said, we're not going to publish this because it conflicts with our prevailing peer-reviewed position. And I was like, okay, I get that. I know you guys like your consensus, but come on, I'm just saying something really obvious here. I'm just saying that there's a difference between flat Earth physics and round Earth physics. I'm saying that, if you guys are, if the prevailing orthodoxy is saying that the sun is minus 40 degrees Celsius heating on the surface, but you can show another model which is, satisfies the exact same thing. It's just an alternative model using a round Earth. So that's a bit more consistent with science, and you can show that the sun creates the climate because sun is hot. I mean, don't you think that's an important difference? And they just said our peer review position is that the sun is minus 40 degrees Celsius. Our peer review position is that it's okay to have flat Earth theory, and that was it. And they shut me down. And I said no, rejection.
What would they argue back against you? How would they defend their assumptions? What would they argue back against you?
They didn't. They didn't defend them. That's the thing, because it's not defendable. Because I said it's a mutually exclusive choice. You can't have both, and so it's not possible for them to defend. The only way to defend it is, as I discussed earlier, that term sophistry. That's the only way to defend their position, and so you use the methods of sophistry. And so, what is sophistry? You refer to consensus. Well, what you're saying might be true, but it's not what we all think. So therefore, we're going to ignore what you say. What you're saying might be true, but we can't, and so forth, right?
How do we know that? How can we trust you? No, I'm not being a twat saying that. I'm just asking, how can we trust you? Why should we trust you?
The only appeal I have, and see, this is a difference. So their appeal is that you should trust them, and that you should trust the consensus, and you would be an idiot to think anything differently than what everybody thinks. That's their appeal to you. I don't have such an appeal. My only appeal is that I think that any basic person can understand what I've shown. That is my only appeal. So my only appeal is that I am asking you to appreciate that there's a mutually exclusive choice to make here, and that it's important and it has consequences. I'm appealing to your reason.
Why is it cold in space then, and warm here?
Well, in Earth's orbit, it isn't cold in space. It's quite hot. If you were to go in space, it's 121 degrees Celsius. That's why astronaut suits are white, so that they reflect all of the radiation. Okay. If they were black, they would be boiled up in there at 120 degrees Celsius.
Well,
if those suits were black.
What about like when the heat is traveling from the sun to the Earth?
Well, yeah, so it travels by radiation from the sun to the Earth. My very last video on my YouTube channel is a great discussion of that, actually.
So, the further you go away from Earth, the colder it gets.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because the intensity of the radiation decreases. That's right, because the intensity of the solar light decreases. The sun, the farther away you get from the sun, the smaller it is in the sky, and the dimmer the light is, because it's just getting spread out. You're further away, so it's dimmer. Basically that.
What about other people that shed doubt on the climate change agenda? How do they argue it? I mean, you're obviously arguing it from quite an absolute position, but how do they argue it against it?
Well, that's what we found. Yeah, a lot of people are missing the point. We found that a lot of people, and because I work with a group of scientists on this, actually, we've been doing this for quite a while, a decade or more. And so when we started looking into the physics and the science, because, we had the qualifications to do so, then we found this and we're like, wow, this is pretty bad. And we thought it would be quite easy just to show this to people. But I think anyone can appreciate, how is a big group of people who have this identity, how are they going to respond to being shown that everything they're doing is completely wrong? They're not going to. So certainly the alarmists and the climate scientists and the meteorologists, they have never responded well to it. And they simply refer to their consensus, even though you're showing them the difference between flat earth theory and round earth theory. It should be the most easy and trivial thing in the world. For some reason, amazingly, it's not. And so it speaks actually to the power of human psychology, and that we're much more emotional and psychological creatures rather than simply rational creatures, which obviously everyone knows that. But then with the other people who were supposed to be skeptics, we showed this to them too, and we did not find a lot of support with them either. And that was the most confusing thing. So we theorized that perhaps some skeptic groups were what's that term? Shills, maybe. Perhaps they're just shills. Maybe they're just sort of front groups because, a lot of the skeptics say, okay, there's a little bit of warming, but it's not going to be as bad. And we're saying, no, and then we say, no, wait, guys, the whole physics of this situation is wrong right from the get-go. It's not that there's going to be some warming from the greenhouse effect. There's going to be none, because there is no greenhouse effect, because this greenhouse effect idea comes from flat earth theory. It doesn't exist. And actually their model, just if you want to touch on physics again, their model of the greenhouse effect for how it should work in the atmosphere on their flat earth theory, you can actually test that. You could test that because it should actually function in a real greenhouse. And the world is filled with real greenhouses. And guess what? You do not actually find the temperatures that should be generated by their model. So there's empirical evidence plain that their effect that they've postulated does not actually function. All real greenhouses demonstrate that it does not function in the way that they're saying that it does.
So climate change skeptics can't be trusted because they are engaging on the same playing field as the climate change supporters. So what you're saying is that they're all just playing their own game when they're both all completely wrong.
Yeah, that's right. It's pointless. What do you call it? It's just war by attrition. It's just pointless. I mean, they're debating the number of angels that can fit on the head of a pin, and they're not even realizing that the question they're asking is wrong in the first place. They need to step back. They need to just take one step back a little bit further and reevaluate things right from the very beginning. And of course, that's what we did. We said, well, we want to evaluate the science. There's a big debate here, so let's start right from the beginning. And we're like, wow. It's right at the beginning. It's literally right at the very beginning where you find the error, and the error is. We thought, well, this will be easy to show people.
Is the ice melting in the Arctic Circle in Antarctica?
Who is a great resource on this is Tony Heller. You probably know him. He has a great YouTube channel. He's always discussing climate science stuff. And basically, I mean, there's a melt every year. There's no trend in the Arctic melting. There's no trend. I mean, it melts and refreezes every year, cyclically, obviously, because of the seasons. But other than that, there's no general trend of melting or anything. The ice is fine in the Arctic.
Is that spacecraft really on Mars?
Probably. Yeah, sure.
Okay. See, your explanation for all this is maybe just a wee bit too simple. You're just saying, look, it's based. That this isn't what we want, though. We want it. It's too simple. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know what you mean. Well, that's. I mean, for me, that should make it simple and easy, but then it actually makes it the most difficult thing of all, because it's so simple that the scale of it actually becomes I mean, it's as simple as zero, but the inverse of zero is infinite, right? So it's so
So
simple that to
you're
accept it
basically
is
saying
just
that
overwhelming.
all these climate change scientists, it's all based on, like as you point out, pseudoscience. It's based on insanity, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sure, there are probably climate scientists who study things like how are the trees growing on this mountain here? Okay, fine, great. You're studying how the trees grow on some mountain. Wonderful. Okay, but in general, the whole idea of man-made climate change and climate change is a problem we need to address, and the greenhouse effect and carbon dioxide, all of that, which is obviously the huge swath of what's going on, especially when it comes to politically and whatnot. Yeah, all that is insanity. Yep, yep. It's running around insanity. It's a vortex of insanity.
And you think it's being done for like a wealth transfer and control?
I'm not sure why it's being done. It's not clear. Yeah. That's. I mean, like I said earlier, we're not really permitted to subscribe to
Well, can
conspiracy
I?
theories. So I don't know why. I mean, yeah, obviously, it could just be Cold War. It could just be Cold Warfare, say between communism and the West. Maybe that's what it is, between China and the West. Maybe that's all it is, and they just came up with really devious psychological ways to undermine our intellectualism and our intellectual institutions and our minds, just as a matter of warfare, like using methods of Sun Tzu. You know, how do you defeat an enemy? Get them to defeat themselves. We'll present them ideas that are so crazy they would never see them, but nevertheless are going to end in their complete inability to compete, because they're going to be running around this vortex of insanity where all this science that they're doing doesn't mean anything anymore. I mean, it could just be like that. It's Cold Warfare, but it's psychological Cold Warfare. I mean, maybe that's the new form of warfare these days that countries do to each other. It could be that. Maybe that's what it is.
But look, let's say you were to have a debate with a climate change scientist. You couldn't have a debate with them because your entire theory and their entire theory are built on two totally different things. So you couldn't debate with them, could you?
Well, I could, but I would simply start with a basis and say, I would simply say, so look, here's where you're starting. Here's the basis of your climate science, and I'm showing that it's wrong. And so the debate would be over. And believe me, we have attempted to have debates with them, and they refuse to. And I think they refuse to because they know that they couldn't. There's no debate to be had. Because we would just start off the debate with, we understand what your position is. Here's your position, and it's flat earth theory, and it's wrong. And here's our alternative position, which is round earth theory, where the sun creates the climate. I mean, it's so plain as day. There's little debate to be had. But of course, that's why they appeal to sophistry instead. Well, the consensus says, and how could this many people be wrong? And who do you think you are? Some sort of genius? You're just an idiot. You know, that's how then the conversation actually goes. Doesn't become a gentlemanly conversation about, principles and reason. It simply becomes a nasty teenage conversation about who is the coolest.
It's a bit like saying that you don't think 2.4 million global deaths based on a positive PCR test within 28 days of a COVID death is the Black Death. You're a COVID denier. Lives don't matter to you. You're. Yeah. It's the same. I mean, I get that. I mean, we get that. I mean, that's the same, what they do. You know, as I point out as well, 2.4 million global deaths from COVID-19, PCR tests, 28 days, out of a population of 7.7 billion people. I mean, do you know how minuscule, even based on that being accurate, how minuscule that actually is? And the whole world,
even if it was accurate, and even if, because as we all know, they've been, like you said, the cold and the flu and the pneumonia and whatnot, which already kills that many people, now isn't, right? they're saying those don't exist anymore. The cold and flu and pneumonia doesn't exist anymore. Now everything is COVID. So yeah, even if you were to discount that, the fact that these numbers aren't correct numbers in the first place, probably, right?
I mean that's why
or
as I
evidently.
said, like it's like they talk about, they say in the UK we've had 120,000 deaths, and I keep saying, well, you've had 120,000 people who have died within 20, sometimes 60 days of a positive COVID-19 test. Of those tests, there is a massive scale of inaccuracy that even the World Health Organization admitted to. The average age of death is 83, and those that have died under the age of 65 have comorbidities. You know,
And as I said, that many people would have been dying already from cold and flu and pneumonia, and now cold and flu and pneumonia don't exist anymore. So work out the math on that, right?
But this really is some rabbit hole stuff, Joseph, because we would get told that as I said, I'm not that expert on the climate change stuff, but you know, we would get told that what we're discussing is dangerous, that it could cost lives, we should be shut down.
That's sophistry, right? It's sophistry. This is the whole. That's why I say I'm living in the Truman Show, or I'm in some sort of bizarre clown world reality, because I'm just like, I'm an astrophysicist. I work in space and with space telescopes and whatnot, and I find myself unable to have a conversation with other scientists about whether or not flat Earth theory is valid, and working out the math of flat Earth theory is valid, scientifically valid and physically valid. It's the most strange situation.
What's your opinion on extraterrestrials?
Oh, well, my opinion is no more informed than anybody else's.
Do you think they're real? Do you think there are aliens out there?
Well, I would think that nothing in the universe is random. Typically, the scientific materialist approach is to say that, well, life is random, and because it's random and improbable, and this could be the only place. But anyway, I don't think that. I think that anything that exists for a reason, and it probably exists with a force behind it, and probably life is universal. If life exists here, I think you would have to just conclude that it probably means that life is universal.
Yeah.
Life could be found everywhere in the universe. If it's found here, why should this be a magical place where it appears once?
See, that's the other thing as well we sometimes forget, is we get so caught up with all the bullshit here. The universe doesn't end. It just keeps going, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is quite a big place. Yeah.
How does that actually work though? It never ends.
Yeah.
I can't work that. Like we can't really process that, can we? It never ends.
No, not really. No. Yeah, the scale of it is. I don't think that's really well known. I mean, does it end or does it curve back on top of itself, where you would?
What's on the other side? What's on the other side of that?
Yeah.
Right. Last one, Joseph, because you're a really interesting guy. What about chemtrails? Are chemtrails real, or is that BS?
I think that there's pretty good, there's papers out there that you can see on that. And certainly I've witnessed for myself the jets go over, and they seem to have been stopped. But about 6 years ago, it was really happening here. And you would see contrails split off. They would split, like a jet contrail would split into two different parts. And one would actually sink. You could watch it. One would start sinking and would remain, and the other one would stay at the same altitude and dissipate. But then the one that remained would sink and then slowly spread out. Yeah, I would watch it carefully, and it seemed like something was going on. It seemed like they were that the contrails were splitting into two different parts. One part, which you would expect, is the water vapor part, the water vapor crystallization part, which dissipates through sublimation relatively quickly within a minute or two. That's what we're all used to seeing. And then there was this other part that would remain, and you would see them separating. And you would see this other remaining part. It would fall down, and the altitude between them would start changing. So yeah, anyway, seemed like there was something there.
Have you ever seen any of Ivor Cummings' stuff, have you heard a guy called Ivor Cummins?
Not familiar with that.
He's called the Fat Emperor. You remind me of him, but to do with climate change. Ivor is big on COVID, and he basically is just saying that it's just unbelievable what is taking place. That it's beyond any. I'll send you the link to his YouTube channel after it. So you're kind of similar to that. As you're obviously just like a normal mainstream kind of guy asking questions, but saying that all this climate science is based on a false position, which is assuming the world is Earth, is flat. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I detail it. It's easy to see. Yeah.
Wow. Right. Anyway, brilliant. Everybody go and follow Joseph on YouTube, please. He's going to do wonders, I'm sure. What do people think of you when you say like stuff to them? Do they get scared? Do they get scared?
Well, there's no, people don't get scared. I think people appreciate it. Normal, healthy people watch it and see it, and they really appreciate it, and and they grow from it. And then the other people are just the climate alarmists, and they're just nasty. They just be as nasty as they possibly can. They won't address anything substantial. They just be nasty. Yeah,
they are. They are, and
there really seems to be two different people in the world. It's so strange. Normal, healthy people who can simply apply, small amounts of critical thinking here and there when needed and when asked, and then people who just are completely nasty, and vile and foul.
Yeah, and I look at Canada as well. Canada, obviously, we've got so much links with the UK. I think you're still part of the you're still the Queen's still the head of state, isn't she, in Canada?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But you look at the way free speech has been destroyed. The ability to discuss things has been shut down. It's shocking.
It is shocking, yeah, and that makes you wonder who is doing this and for what purpose? And is it just because billionaires and politicians are the type of people that have psychological thrill from forcing people to do other things? It doesn't matter what you're forcing them to do. It's just the point is to force them to do things. And actually, the greater the thrill is found in getting them to do more and more insane things. And so there's great thrill in getting people to cover their faces for no reason. There's great thrill in getting people to pay taxes for flat earth theory. I mean, think of that. That's what's most shocking to me. It's like, okay, sure, you have a cold, put on a mask. Okay, whatever. It's not something we generally do. That doesn't shock me. I don't think it's necessary. But for me, we're paying taxes and we're structuring our whole government and what they plan to do, the whole economy, for flat earth theory, around flat earth theory. It's, shocking.
Wow. Listen, brilliant. Joseph, honestly, that was a mind melt tonight, but it was brilliant. So listen, I'm going to catch up with you again and we'll keep in touch. All right.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so you'll send me a link, eh?
I will. I'll send you a link. And okay. Joseph, I have to ask, do Canadians say a boot? Do they say a boot?
We say about. Does it sound
so
like
you do say it. You do say it then. I'm only joking. Right, listen, Joseph, brilliant. Honestly, really, really enjoyed that. You're a good guy. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay.
Fantastic. All right.
Cheers. Okay. Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Joseph, legend. And really, really enjoyed that. Wow.